So bear with me for a moment here.
All right, so the recording has started, and I am very pleased to present the group with my teammate from EQengineered, Russ Harding, VP of Engineering with Testcontainers for .NET.
Yep. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Jim, and I appreciate everybody else taking the time to join and to let me run through this slide deck, and please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions or comments or anything of that nature. And we'll continue on. So yeah, a real fast about me, and I'm not a fan of the the me. So was a U.S. Army veteran. I've been doing .NET for about 22 years, since roughly June of 2001 when Beta 2 came out. Very much a cloud native evangelist for those organizations that will sit still long enough to hear me. I think I'm an architect at this point. I've been a team lead of multiple organizations at various management levels, and I try to stay always curious. So yeah, I am the vice president of engineering for EQengineered. We are a small consulting organization that we really try to get into the weeds with our clients, and primarily focused. I'd say primarily we've definitely found a niche of really helping organizations to modernize their legacy software, and there's some of it out there. So with that, we will cut to a quick agenda here. I will just touch very quickly upon containerization for anybody who might not be as familiar with what containerization is. And we will get into a quick introduction of what is test containers, and we'll actually pull up Visual Studio and we'll walk through some of it. And we'll go through some, a couple of tests, and we can talk about a little bit more customizations. Really, the idea is just to wet everybody's feet in the idea and hopefully to get everybody really excited about this I think fantastic technology. And again, if anybody has any questions or anything they want to contribute, please feel free to jump in at any time. All right. So jumping over. So what is containerization? In my own words, without trying to use the word container, it really is a fully encapsulated bundle that provides all of the dependencies and configurations in a somewhat isolated and lightweight unit to run your desired package. So if you've got a piece of software that you've been working on, or your team has been working on, and you want to deploy it somewhere, you really are, instead of building a server or allocating resources in the cloud, you'll still have to allocate resources in the cloud, but instead of building a server, having to set that server up for the IT department, manage all of the monthly security cycles, manage your high availability, your disaster recovery, the whole 9 yards, right? I mean, you still have to do some of those things, but instead of having to build servers and set all that up, the container is really just a fully encapsulated unit that contains the operating system, almost all the dependencies, unless you have some outside dependencies like file systems or database, but it's really got everything the application itself needs to run in just a really lightweight container. And with .NET, they've really been focusing, at least for me in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been seeing a lot of cross-platform. So most of the work that I've been doing has been deploying to Linux containers, and very lightweight, very quick and easy to work with, and Microsoft makes it fantastic and easy to work with. I would definitely encourage anybody, if you're not as familiar, take a look at Docker Hub, Microsoft's artifact registry, and even Oracle has some if you have Oracle in your enterprise. And there's a ton of containers out there, pretty much anything that you can think of, whether it be Redis, whether it be SQL Server, whether it be Oracle, whether it be RabbitMQ, Postgres. There's probably there's probably a container out there for it that you can just pull down, stand up, and get it up and running. So that's a quick overview of containerization. So test containers. So what are test containers? So really, test containers provides the ability to, just like what I was talking about, a self-contained operation. So if I want to have a database and I need to create integration testing, or I need to have really any kind of testing that I want to do, and I really need to use the real thing, mocking it out is just too much hassle. Test containers provides a solution for that. It really is very simple to use. It really works under the covers with Docker. You really don't need to be an expert in Docker Compose or any of the more advanced systems. And really, it becomes some of your other problems where you're standing up environments, or you're standing up a Docker container on your own, where you end up with poor conflicts or the system's not started. Handles all of that stuff for you. And it does handle some of the most popular languages like .NET and these other ones that I've never heard of before. But you know, the internet tells me they're popular. So really, if you want to create, if you need to unit test against things like MySQL, Postgres, any kind of message brokers, right? Kafka or RabbitMQ. These are really fantastic tools to be able to use in that, right? If you want to have consistency, right? You know, every time you're running a test, you get a suite of tests, or you can even get it down to an individual test. You can spin up a container for that test, load the data, do your test, tear it down, and it really it's really fantastic for that consistency. If you're talking about resource efficiency, right? You're building something on demand, and you're building it small, and you're building it quick, and then you're immediately getting rid of it. So you're not having to allocate resources ahead of time. You're not having to have that expensive resources ahead of time. You're not having to have all of the IT infrastructure that goes along with that. Your software development team doesn't have to figure any of it out, right? It really is just a NuGet package in your project that you connect to, and you just say, hey, I want to run this container. It gives you all of its connection details. I'll show you a little bit of that. And you run the test, and it just works, runs the test, starts up the container, and when the test is done, the container is gone. Any questions before I move on? All right. So let's, I'll write some code. Now this is going to be quick, and as you may suspect, I already have a lot of the code snippets already done. So this should be fairly quick. But I'll run through everything here. So I'm just going to set up a couple of folders on my local machine. Nothing fancy here, right? So I'm just setting up a folder for test containers, and I'm jumping into it. I'm going to do a quick setup of the project to the command line, but then I'll end up opening Visual Studio. So you know, all of the usual cache of characters. I am going to go ahead and again jump into that folder. We're going to build a new solution. I'm going to build a class library. I'm going to call it customer service, and I'm going to add that customer service library to my solution. Right. I'm going to do all of this. There's nothing super fancy here. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of blow through this. So I'm going to set up EQunit. I'm putting everything together, and really creating a test project and tests for all of it. Now, this is where, we're going to start to get into some of the fun bits here. I'm going to add Postgres to this. So we'll have a Postgres database. And now I will open this up in Visual Studio. And we can continue to navigate through this if I can figure out how to use my computer. Test containers. There we are, and there we are. All right, so we have test containers, we have a service, and we have some tests. There's nothing in here right now. I was just doing some scaffolding. So I am going to take the opportunity to rename this to customer. We'll walk through some of this. And, oh, that's what I want. Yeah, there you go. So I'm gonna just copy some code into here, some snippets, so that we can set all of this up. I am going to set up a service class. This is not going to be overly complex, but again, I'm trying to set up the demo effect. Add new item. Come on.
Not be an authentic presentation without demo demons. So
It really wouldn't be an authentic. Yeah, exactly. Visual Studio System. Yeah. Come on, add class. Yeah, that's exactly it. It wouldn't be an authentic demo if there wasn't something going on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab some code here for Postgres, and we are going to do this the old-fashioned way, right? We're going to actually go straight to Postgres. But you can see here, you know, there's nothing fancy. There's no entity framework. There's no mocking or anything like that, right? I am using a Postgres DB connection provider. Did I not put the, oh, there it is, because I got to create one. I have another class to create. So I'm going to end up using the Postgres data command, and you know, we're definitely doing this bare metal, the good old fashioned way, as I like to say. Let's see. Now I know I installed that package, but as per usual, it doesn't remember. Please. There we go. All better. All right. So jump over to the tests, and I am going to rename this to not that. I think I would know how to use my computer at this point. Cool. And we'll grab some tests and we'll pull this in. All right, so I need to find test containers. So I'm going to do it this way. We'll browse. And I will find test containers, right, for Postgres. And if you look, and I'll just stop for a second and just take a look at test containers. There's a ton of them. All right, so you got the base project, you've got MS SQL, you got Postgres, Redis, Kafka. There's a ton of them. SQL Edge, MySQL, right? And you could obviously build your own if you wanted to. Oracle, CosmoDB, they do a fantastic job mocking out, you know, some resources, DynamoDB, that are actually up in the cloud. So this is definitely a nice way to be able to have some of those resources. I'm going to go ahead and just pull in Postgres, and I will jump back over here, and voila. So at this point, oh, sorry, let me pop Visual Studio back up. So at this point, I have a reference to my customer service. I am going to get my connection string from this Postgres container, right? So it's a container builder, just like we're familiar with in web projects and other projects where you're setting up and you build it. You can set it up with an image. And this is fairly simplistic, but I can actually add, you know, database names, usernames, passwords. You can set, you know, what to do at startup, at mount up. You can set all of this right up, and it's very powerful, but also very easy. And if I want to run it, let's see if I can do this in both screens. Now I've lost Visual Studio again. There we go. So I will go ahead and I'm just going to run this, and I have something else running, but you'll see Postgres container will pop up there. Hopefully I don't have any compiler errors, because, why not? So there you go. So test containers popped up. It's running. We might even get a Postgres container pop up here in a second. Probably needs to download it. Yep, there it is. There's Postgres. So if it hasn't downloaded it, it will download it. So the very first time that you run the test, it does take a few moments, depending on your bandwidth, because just like any other Docker image, it's got to pull the base container down. So some of them, if you're running, like some of them can be fairly large. I've got a handful of them over here, but this Postgres one is 240 megs, so that one's not too bad. But like Oracle that I've got for other projects, it's a little steep. But as you saw, I pulled down the container and we loaded some data, right? And then, I created some data and I added them in there, and this create call, each one of these actually goes and creates, it inserts into the database table, right? So we created the table if it didn't exist, right? Then we insert those customers into it. And then that call for get customers actually reads those customers that were added. So all of this is going against a real Postgres database that is ephemeral. It's really only there for a few moments, and then it's gone. And it really can be that easy. It can get a bit more complicated too, right? I mean, you can. I'll kind of touch on this as we get into it, but one of the other nice things that I discovered actually, and I've got another project back here that I use for a demo project, and this one uses Oracle. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I don't have any qualms showing it, because again, it's a demo project. But this one pulls in and it uses an Oracle container, and it does really the same thing. I populate a bunch of data, and here I'm using Entity Framework. But I'll go ahead and run this, and we can see that it's going to go ahead and it's going to run all of these tests. It's going to start up the test container, master object. It actually sets up Oracle, and you watch, you can see Oracle. You can actually see Oracle running. It actually waits for Oracle. You can see the test is spinning, so it's waiting for Oracle to get started. So it does all of this, and once Oracle is started, then it will go ahead and it actually will start running these tests. Right. So demo effect, I'm sure, but these should all start running here in a moment. Yep. And yep, there we go. So 5 of them have run. There we go, and all done. And now this container is gonna get destroyed for me, which is fantastic. Now, one of the other things that as I kind of jump through this, yep, see the container's gone. The other thing I wanted to share with everybody is, and I don't know what everybody is using for CI/CD pipelines, but for Azure DevOps and I know Git Actions, they both actually have Docker available in the pipeline. So I actually pushed this up to our demonstration repo and thought for sure this wasn't gonna, I was gonna have a hard time. But I pushed this up and it just ran. And you can see up in here that I go ahead and I'm going to the test containers. I'm connected to Docker. It actually gives me a decent amount of memory. So I got about 6 gigs of memory. It actually pulls the test container, starts the container, right? Everything that you just saw me do in Visual Studio happened over here. All my tests ran, and then it destroyed the container. And I think this is absolutely fantastic, because again, this illustrates the point that you can have these self-contained units where you can actually run integration tests against the actual back end that your development teams are working with, in a controlled and isolated environment, so you don't have to worry about data changing out from underneath you at any given time. So, you know, this to me is a very powerful tool, that it's really quite simple to, you know, come into your system, tell it, you know, I want to have an Oracle container, or I want to have a Postgres container, right? Depending on what it is that you're trying to set up. And again, this is not hard to set up. This is very easy in the develop, and really it just kind of gives you, right? It just gives you the connection string. So if you're building multiple containers because you're going to run a different container with each test will get a different connection string. However it is, right? So you've got all of these options. Now, if I come back to the slides, before I move on, does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, Russ.
Yes, sir.
So I have a scenario in mind where we're using Oracle and we have a schema, and we might have sample data, you know, that we want in our schema. Have you ever, you know, used basically one of the containers up in the cloud to then generate an example container where you freeze dried some operations and then publish that container back again so that you could use it as your test container, you know, like a modified a version?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than basically, you know, whenever you create a container, you basically create your own container with a Docker image or Docker file, and you set up, basically you install your software and you set up your your program. So in this case, we could set up Oracle, we could set up those tables, we could map all that out, and then you can publish that to a private registry if you wanted to. And then at that point, you would use that new container as your base to move forward with. So yeah, you could absolutely do that. Your other option would be kind of like what you see here, or, you know, again, maybe with Entity Framework, if you wanted to get, you know, super fancy, you could use Entity Framework migrations, and you could pump a whole bunch of test data into it. The Oracle example I was just showing, I actually am using EF core migrations where I build the database table and I populate several thousand employees actually in it in a few seconds, and then I actually run against all of that.
Okay.
But yeah, as simple as you want, as complicated as you want. Manny, I see a hand up.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Russ. I think my question is a variation of what Bob just asked. So yeah, I was going to ask whether who's responsible for the tear down and the cleanup, but it seems like if we're just resetting and using the same container, you're just starting from the same point every time, right? Is it possible to mount? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, is it possible to mount a drive to I guess persist the changes? So if you run a certain set of tests, like just to set up something and record it to the drive.
I would have to look, to be entirely honest with you, but that's sort of not the point of the test containers. I'd have to look, and maybe there is a use case for that, and that doesn't immediately jump to mind. But in my mind, you know, the point of the test containers is not to persist that data and not to allow some external force to be able to manipulate that data. If I needed something like that, I would actually set up a traditional Docker container and actually mount that drive as a permanent repository. But in the case of the test containers, I'm looking for everything to be fairly ephemeral, right? I mean, in Bob's example, maybe we've got like a static set of data that's always there that we can use as a base container instead of pulling one from the internet. But when that container is torn down and we start over again, we're always starting over from the same known spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So every time build it up, run the test, and automatically get rid of that.
Yeah. So you can do anything you want with the test, right? If you want to test inserting thousands of records into the table for performance, you can do that, right? And have no worry that any of that data is going to leak into the rest of your testing system. However you want to, you know. So yeah, but once that container is torn down, it's going to, you're starting from scratch.
It's like
Perfect.
Groundhog Day.
It's just like Groundhog Day, right? And that's what you want in your integration and unit test, right? You want repeatability and consistency, so you have control over your environment. I know we don't always have control over our environments in the real world, but if we should be able to replicate whatever those situations are, and I know I'm speaking very highbrow here, but we should be able to replicate those situations in our own environment so that we can make sure that we're handling any of those edge cases. Should, right?
This goes back to that works on my machine.
It works on my machine. That's it. That's it. Everybody that works with me loves that because I've got that icon. I pop up on everything. The obligatory. Does anybody having a problem with this? Nope, works for me. Unhelpful. Definitely take a look at the test containers, right? I just grabbed go to their website, read what they've got. They've got a ton of stuff. I just took a screenshot of just a few things that could fit on my screen. As you can see here, there's just a ton of stuff, and this is just .NET alone, and this isn't even everything that was available on this screen. But they've got a lot of stuff that we could pull down and we could work with, and they've got so many different options. It's actually really a fantastic platform for controlling that kind of environment. Yes, sir. Did I see another hand?
Yeah, I waved a hand. So how is a test container different than like a regular container? Like you're talking like the test container is not just Ubuntu, but it's Ubuntu and some service. But I couldn't use just plain Oracle's standard database container as my test container, or is there something special about the way that they're named or used?
No. As you're absolutely right. It really is just a container, as you see, as you can see in the code example here, right? We're really making a call to Docker Hub and saying, hey, get me this Docker container, right? The test containers in the wrappers that they put around that really add a flair of ease of use and convenience to handle that setup inside of your unit and integration tests and your teardown, right? So the one of the big things that's important is to me, well, the simplicity of it, but also, right, the connection string. So if I want to spin up multiple containers, again, if I'm looking at some of these, let me go back one, right? So if I'm looking at some of these guys here, right, some of these might be really fast to set up. Some of them I may want to have an instance per test for whatever reason, right? So you can actually get as fancy as having 6 or 7 or 10 of these containers actually spun up and running for each one of your tests. One container, one test. You can get that granular, or you can do it for a collection of tests or your entire assembly, however you want to do it. Again, you're kind of limited a little bit only by your imagination, but it really is pulling a real container from Docker Hub, or on my other my other example here, I'm pulling a real container from Oracle, and in this case I'm setting a username and password on it, right? Nothing fancy, nothing I'm not I'm willing to share. Don't go buying stuff with all of that. But no, really and truly, Bob, there's nothing different. There's nothing special about the containers themselves. It's really all about the scaffolding around them and how it's managed. And again, the test containers framework makes it easy to work with Postgres or SQL Server, and it gives you all of those convenience methods and mechanisms in order to be able to access those resources very simply and intuitively, as well as tearing them down and getting and managing that whole life cycle for you. Make sense?
Okay.
All right. Yes, Mr. Wilcox.
So I'm kind of curious, you've said that this is kind of like primarily set up for testing scenarios and stuff like that. Hence the name and all that, but is there anything that would stop you from using these in a deployment of any sort, or?
I would say no, there's nothing necessarily stopping you. I would probably, as a general practice, want to, suggest you be careful about actually deploying them. But if you wanted to use it in your own local dev environment, and every time you stood up your environment that you used a test container, and then, if dev do test containers, if prod, you're getting, real connection strings, you could absolutely do that. I would say, without stealing maybe too much of your thunder, that .NET Aspire, which is kind of moving in that direction, is really the other side of that same coin, right? So you could use the same images. It really provides a nice mechanism to do all of that, development, where it brings the containers down for you and sets all of that up, again, without needing to necessarily become a expert in Docker Compose and learn all of this stuff, which I have recently taught myself, right?
Fantastic.
Yes, isn't it? Because, somebody said, well, Aspire is not ready yet, so we should use Docker Compose. I don't know who would have told me that, Jim.
So actually, that was my other question as far as that goes. I noticed that you had Aspire as part of your build pipeline, and I was kind of curious if how much that was connected to this, and
yeah. So the demo project that I have, for EQengineered is a little bit of a hybrid. So I've got it, so, and I won't spend too much time on it because that's not necessarily the purpose of this conversation, but I do have it so that I could actually mostly, I'm not going to do it here because I know it'll explode, but I should be able to flip back and forth and use Aspire if I want to actually use the Aspire and check out and see how it's, because Preview 4 was just recently released a couple of days ago. See how that's evolving and continue to use it. I am primarily using Aspire and not using the app host so much, but I am using the service defaults, and I'm using all of the Aspire wrappers around, Oracle and SQL Server and all of these other as opportunities to improve my telemetry, metrics, and reporting. So, they've done a fantastic job, and you don't necessarily have to use the Aspire app host in order to do that. But again, I don't want to steal too much of your thunder on that. I know
that's actually not, because my presentation is a lot, earlier, lower level, or higher level. It's sort of, introductory. Here's how you get rolling. Congratulations, go have fun. So.
Yeah. We're not in the Boston Code Camp, so I will take kind of a little bit of an opportunity, and I'll fire this up. But I've got really all of the logging and metrics that kind of come along with Aspire. So actually, I've got this application, and then if I wanted to go into something like Grafana, I can do that, and they're all, again, demo effects. So this is probably going to blow up in my face. Please work. Look at that, it worked. So I'm using all of those telemetries and metrics that Aspire gives me. Really, they've done a fantastic job of. To be too much of a fanboy here, but I mean, they've done a fantastic job of really providing a nice, I think, opinionated model to help developers pull in those telemetries and metrics using open telemetry, so the industry standards, wrapping all of that in there, actually adding some opinionation around retries and all of the best practices when you're dealing with external resources. And they've done a fantastic job, I think, of also providing you the ability to override their opinion and do what you want to do. So I mean, they've really done kind of a pretty good job with that. And again, you don't necessarily need to use the Aspire app host. So you can, in my case, I really replaced all of that Aspire app host with Docker Compose, and I can run Elasticsearch, and I can run Prometheus and Redis and all of it. So
sweet. Thank you.
Yes. won't linger too much on this. But it is fun. But yes, yeah. So it's all, and I did just build it into the pipeline, so I make sure that it all builds. All right, so back to this. So again, largely, I feel like, when it comes to the test containers, you guys have all been asking some pretty good questions. I think you're largely limited, really by your only imagination, right? What I've shown here today is really just a quick starting point, and I'm hoping that it's something that everybody can take back to their teams, especially if you're struggling with the integration side of things, right? Or even necessarily the unit testing, trying to figure out how you want to mock some of your data out. And this could provide a way of really alleviating that hassle, because you can actually spin up a real instance of whatever it is that you're trying to mock out instead, and actually just load data into it and do full end-to-end testing without necessarily having to involve your QA team or your IT team or your DevOps team to actually stand anything up or be concerned that there's going to be kind of any kind of intervention. The simplicity and ease of configurations is another important one that I really, I hope that kind of came across here, right? You can get complicated with it, obviously, but it was very simple. It took minutes, right? Through some magic of copy and paste to set up the test container, set up some tests, and just crank through them, right? It's really very easy. And again, like I showed briefly there, it's integrated out of the box with the all the levels of Azure DevOps. Right, the free tier all the way up to you're paying all the money. You've got it right there. It just works. Now, I can't speak to the on-premises install of Azure DevOps, or I don't know if they still call it Team Foundation Server, but the on-premises install, not sure. I'm not sure about things like Team City. All of those, I'd imagine you need to have Docker engine installed, but then it's just command line, and it all just works. It's all just part of the .NET test, and it just works. As long as you have Docker installed, it should just work.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you think is it true that the test container library could be constructing a temporary YAML file and then running Docker Compose on it during the setup, and then during the teardown, tearing down those Docker containers? You suppose it works that simply? Is that what it does, or does it have some other API or library that it jiggles?
I am not certain. I would not be surprised if it was doing something as simple as creating that Docker Compose under the table for us. I will say it's an open source project. It's available on GitHub, so if you're that interested, definitely go look at it. And I haven't gotten that deep into it, but it's a very well maintained, documented project. Exactly how they do it, I'm sure that they're doing some advanced work directly with the Docker API, but nothing that couldn't be expressed in a Docker Compose file as well. You just don't, it's taking that away from the developer, who a lot of times is not going to be that systems engineer. That's kind of the goal here, and letting the tool handle that for them, and it does a fantastic job of it. Where we don't need to necessarily involve a DevOps team. Just to kind of finish this one up, I mean, as far as cost effective, again, you're not having to stand up resources, you're not having to involve other teams. The developers can largely handle this entirely by themselves, as long as there's a Docker engine available to the build pipeline. Wherever it is that you're running .NET Test, it just works, and that's the important bit, right? I mean, I could go to my to the demo project here, and assuming that this puts me in the right folder, I can run .NET Test, and it'll just work here too. demo effect, right? So let's see if it blows up my face. Yeah, see, there you go. Fired up the test container, pulled down Postgres, ran the tests, and it exited. So as long as you can run .NET tests and you have Docker, the Docker engine running, it'll just work. So again, from a cost-effective standpoint, you don't have to have all these resources. You don't have to involve all these other teams. It's very quite straightforward and quite simple. And again, great community and ecosystem. This the documentation, the GitHub site is fantastic. If you just go to Testcontainers I think it's .org, and they've got a ton of stuff there, and the documentation is fantastic. And really working with these is just like working with any other Docker container. So it's all very easy. Yeah, so not gonna linger on this. Like I said, we went through it. Works on the command line. You can see in .NET. So in my Azure DevOps, this is the YAML that I have. Really nothing fancy here, right? I'm just saying that I want to run a test command, looking for all of the test projects, and that's it. So I'm not having to tell it anything fancy. Again, it's all self-contained inside of that NuGet package, and it just kind of handles it for you. Again, I know that Azure DevOps works. I know that GitLab works. I'm not fairly certain that AWS, and depending on if you're on a cloud version of Bamboo or TeamCity or Jenkins, as long as the Docker daemon is available to you, you can run it. So here's some of the resources. Again, if you want to go to test containers, and let me open this up so that I know. Yes, it's testcontainers.org, and I can actually put this into the Teams chat, which I have just lost the window to. Oh, right here. That's why I can't find it. I'll actually put this right here. So you get, right on the main page. But we don't have a chat because we're in a.
Yeah, it's if you're in as a guest account, it won't show you the chat.
Oh, that's sad. You're not a guest. I'll send it to you. Yeah, I don't know, but if you just want to go to the test container site and definitely check it out, they get a ton of fantastic documentation on here. And again, they got getting started guides, and you can go through all of the different languages that they support. They're really, again, convenience. It's really quite easy, Java, Go, I mean, I've never heard of any of these before, but the internet tells me they must be popular, but it definitely works with .NET. They've got a ton of other resources. They have Slack channels. They have GitHub. Again, I'll just pop open the GitHub. I won't, you can definitely go find this, but they've got, a ton of documentation. You can see, all the previous releases. They've got it all here. They do a really fantastic job. And then again, if it's on, these public registries, and if you've worked with Docker containers and Docker Hub before, everything is on Docker Hub. And if it's not on Docker Hub, then you probably don't need it unless it's Oracle. So everything is there. So you can pull in any kind of container, and you can work with just generic containers, and you have to do a little bit more work if it's not something that Test Containers already knows about. So you'll have to do a little bit of that setup, but that's okay. It's still not hard to do. So that's primarily it. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer? I think there was a lot of good discussion here. I'm going to stop sharing.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody, taking the time. I hope this was helpful, maybe a little educational. I hope that maybe some of the teams that you're all working with might there might be some value in pointing some of your engineers toward this.
Thanks, Russ.
Yeah,
this is pretty cool. This is great stuff.
Yeah, no, I like it, obviously.
if you happen to be interested in catching that again by chance, that
I'm all the
is
way at the end of the day. I'm all the way at the bottom right-hand corner.
okay. Yeah, you're further down.
Further
There
down.
we go. Right here. Okay,
Yeah.
so Russ is at 3:30. We do have there's a lot of our regulars in here. Udayappa, Bob Crowley, Maura and Bill Wilder, Beth Wolfset, Paul Swider. All of these folks are kind of regulars in the community around here. Bob German, it's like lots of this is the part that kills me. I'm up first, but they got me up against Bill Wagner, and I'm like, I want to go to Bill Wagner's session.
I know. There's a couple of them that I'd like to go to as well. Yeah.
So again, this is this coming Saturday. Don't let the weather deter you. It's only going to be rain down in Massachusetts. So, but in fact, it should be perfect for a code camp. It's not like you can go out and do yard work or take a walk or anything. You might as well go to code camp and learn some stuff. So.
It's true. It's not going to be a nice day.
Benny, you had a question?
No, just fixed the camera. Well, I was commuting before, so I switched to something that had a camera. So I figured I'd be polite and turn it on.
Very cool. Well, I guess unless there are any other questions, does anybody else have any other events or so one thing that we used to do at these fairly often is if anybody's aware of any particular job openings or is looking for a job, feel free to pipe up. And otherwise, if you've got something going on as far as community events or something like that, so yeah, that's all open game here. So, but I've already gone on about Code Camp and Give Camp. So, and with that, this group meets every third Thursday of the month. Stay tuned for a little bit more regularity with that going forward. We've had some downturns as far as getting speakers and stuff like that goes over the past couple of months, but I'm expecting that we'll bring that around as build gets closer, especially a lot of interesting announcements getting ready to come out there. And the other group that I'm involved with, sort of a legacy thing, is the SharePoint users group, which is now called the Granite State Microsoft 365 users group, meets the first Thursday of every month. So that actually has a physical location to meet at. So you check out meetup.com for that as well. And otherwise, I will let you get back to your evening. And if you're up for it, Code Review Nightly is at 9:00, so literally in a couple of hours. But that's also on meetup.com. It shows up only on Mondays, but it's 5 nights a week. So I will let you get back to your evenings otherwise, unless I've been so busy talking that I didn't let somebody else pipe up.
So Jim, Build is Build in person?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And online.
Yes.
And okay, end of May.
Yep.
Okay. Maybe next year. My son's graduating high school this year, and I don't think I can go anywhere.
Yeah, I understand. I completely understand.
You got to follow him around and make sure he completes all his work, that kind of thing.
You nail on the head.
I got one of those too.
It is a constant fight against that short timer attitude, and I get it, but come on.
Yep. I had both my kids graduate last year, so I'm fresh out of kids to do that this year. So, but all right. Well, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you coming out, and Russ, definitely awesome presentation, and thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Oh, well, thank you for listening, and I hope it was you know, it was worth coming to.
It was good,
definitely.
Russ. Thank you.
It was.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Jim.
very much. Thank you.
All right. Hope to see
All
you
right.
Saturday.
Good night.
Bye.
Cheers.
Good night.